All right, guys, welcome back. Southeastern 14 with Max Barr once again as we continue our team previews for the 23-24 season in college basketball. Of course, looking at all 14 SEC teams here. As always, if you want to reach out, sponsor any of our basketball content or any other shows we have on the channel, check out the email in the ticker below there, caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. You can reach out, advertise your product on any of our shows here. But let's talk about the Rebels, Max, because it is a new era. The Beard era begins in Oxford as Chris Beard takes over as head coach. And if you just start there, as you and I have talked about this summer, the guy wins everywhere he goes. We know, the offseason storylines and such, but he is now the head coach at Ole Miss. And yeah, I think you would fully expect him to win. The biggest question is how much do they win right away this season? We will find out.
Can you smell that, Blake? Season's right around the corner. Let's go.
Yeah.
I am so pumped up, man. And as you guys may know, I am very high on this Ole Miss team. It's probably the most excited team I have this offseason just because of how much they can literally go from bottom of a conference to top of a conference. I don't know if there's another team in the country that has the coaching change, the transfer class, the culture change. This team is going to shock a lot of people this season, and I can't wait.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. Of course, as we're going to talk about, a lot of this is going to come down to who plays and who doesn't play, because they're certainly going to have a very talented roster overall. When you think about all the new players they're adding to the mix, I think 10 newcomers on this roster. And it's just a matter of, again, who's going to play and who's not going to play. I think we can just start there because, we usually split this up by backcourt and front court, and we'll still kind of do that. But here's the deal. As we're recording this, in mid-October, we don't know if two, truly game-changing type players for this team are going to be eligible to play because they are two-time transfers. Of course, that's Brandon Murray, who's coming over from Georgetown. He was at LSU before that. So he's going to need a waiver if he's going to be eligible to play. If he does, he will be a starter from day one and make a huge impact on this team. Same goes for Moussa Cisse, who, of course, 7'1", comes over, elite shot blocker, started at Memphis, went to Oklahoma State. Again, a two-time transfer. We don't know yet if he's going to get a waiver. So it's almost like, Max, this is still going to be a good team if these two guys aren't playing, but it's very clear that if they are in the fold, I mean, they bring skills to the table that, are not on this roster elsewhere. And so we always talk about the importance of these kind of decisions, but man, I can't think of a team out there in this kind of scenario in the SEC like this that needs those two guys, the most in terms of what they can bring to try to start that ascent in the SEC.
Yeah, I think the more important of the two, I mean, both are very important, don't get me wrong. But I think the more important of the two is Moussa Cisse, just because if you don't have Moussa Cisse, then it's kind of Jamarion Sharp all by his lonesome to protect the rim. You got a few freshmen that might show up in the front court. But if you don't have Moussa Cisse, front court's looking pretty thin. As where if we don't have Brandon Murray, there's the guard position is a little bit deeper. But Moussa Cisse, I mean, this guy is good. This guy is like the best rim protector in the country. Good. And so I've been waiting for months on this decision. I've tweeted about it multiple times. When are we getting these decisions? I don't know. We did get a decision on Allen Flanigan though. Allen Flanigan has been approved. And he will be on the squad. So that's a multi-year SEC starter. That's kind of just being overlooked. Like I've not really heard anyone mention the name Allen Flanigan. If he was on Auburn right now, he would be starting as a senior starter. So Allen Flanigan really big. But I just wanted to, before we really break down into the roster, I wanted to kind of go over Chris Beard just a little bit. And especially his numbers. Okay, because not everyone, but I feel like people kind of discredit that Texas Tech run as kind of just like a Cinderella run. Here are some some Chris Beard numbers since he's been in the Division I level. He started in 2015 at Little Rock, but then quickly, obviously, moved on to Texas Tech. Since he's been at Texas Tech, so he moved on there to 2016, 2017 year. Since he moved to Texas Tech, he has finished top 40 every single year. Top 40. So, and he has not had the teams like last year's team at Texas and the team before that was loaded, right? You had Marcus Carr, you had Tyrese Hunter, you had you had a full team. His teams at Texas Tech were scrappy, where he would get the most out of guys that you did not think were going to perform the way they did, and he would grind out good Big 12 seasons, and we've seen how good the Big 12 has been lately. Look at this from 2018. These are his Ken Pom finishes, okay? 5, 21, 17, 15, 5. I mean, talk about consistency. I mean, so you got one of the most consistent coaches in the entire country. And then you look at his conference finishes. Where is this guy finishing the conference? Like, yeah, he's got good numbers because his defense is always going to be top 10, so the computers love him. But is he translating to results? Yeah, he is. He has only finished outside the top half of his conference one time. Every other time is top half finish. So in that only time that he didn't finish top half was his first year in the Power 5 level at Texas Tech. He finished 7th. So one outside the top half. I mean, unless Chris Beard forgot how to coach, you're looking at a top half finish.
Yeah. I mean, it's the data speaks for itself there when you just look at the numbers, like you said. And, he is someone that clearly has learned how to adjust to this era of the transfer portal and understanding how to quickly build a team and more specifically find the right guys, I think, that fit exactly how he wants to play. And that's why I think there's a lot of optimism for this roster, is because I feel like he's done that. We said it's a team that's going to be built around defense, but his teams have also been a little underrated, I think, at times offensively, just because they've been so good on the defensive end. Sometimes the offensive efficiency numbers and such have been probably undervalued a bit. But if we do look at this roster, like we said, Murray and Cisse, if we take them out of the mix for now, and we look at everyone else, you mentioned it, there's clearly, to me, more depth in the backcourt than there is the front court. And it's because you do have Matthew Murrell coming back, basically 15-point a game type scorer last year. Injuries and such played a role. Not a great 3-point shooter, but I'm curious to see if that's something that continues to improve there. I would think so, for someone who has aspirations of playing in the NBA. So I'd be shocked, honestly, if he's not one of their leading scorers. I think even, on a team that's added new guys, I still think he's going to be the, leading scorer, second leading scorer, however you want to put it together. But to me, it all starts with him. But like you said, if you just keep going, you do have an interesting group here, whether it's, an Allen Flanigan, again, who would be starting at Auburn. He can play multiple positions, as we know, but someone who can score out on the wing and, do a lot of things, both as a rebounder, a defender, those types of things as well. You've got Austin Nunez coming over from Arizona State, true point guard. I think that's always something, kind of like Chris and I were talking about, with Missouri. Missouri has a true point guard in Nick Honor, and there are just some teams where you have, you can mix and match and all that, but it always is nice to have one guy who just knows going to play the point. And so he's someone that's certainly an option there. You've got Jalen Murray coming over from that St. Peter's team, who we know made a lot of noise there in the NCAA tournament, and he's someone who has played a lot of minutes. So that's, again, two guys who have been in that role. You've got who else? Caldwell. You've got Cowards there. So you've got a lot of options, I think, in terms of like your backcourt / wing type guys here for Ole Miss. And so I don't think depth's an issue, as you mentioned, even if a Brandon Murray isn't eligible to play.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna knock one part of this team, it's the lack of a true point guard that has been proven at the at an SEC level.
Yeah.
Nunez has showed great flashes. If you look at his highlight clips from Arizona State, he's flashy. He's explosive. It's a little bit of a turnover issue, but it's a very small sample size. So you don't really know exactly what you're going to get. And then with Jalen Murray, you nailed it on the head with his tournament success. So he does have that kind of postseason play, that leadership. And what I really like about Murray is that he's from New York. in those tough guards usually can play well in the Power 5 level. So yeah, there's no true point guard, but I think we might see like Allen Flanigan brings up the ball one possession, then Matt Murrell brings up the ball one possession, and you just kind of get into this dribble handoff situation where it kind of gets muddy and there's really no true point guard that's running the offense. Um, so yeah, I mean there are questions offensively on how smooth is this ship going to run. I don't think it's going to run that smooth to start. I mean you're asking a lot out of guys that haven't been proven at this SEC level in terms of Nunez, Murray, uh, you know, TJ Caldwell, Robert Coward. We haven't really seen a ton of them. I do like what I see out of TJ Caldwell. But what I think this team is going to do their damage offensively is going to be those wing guys and then Jaemyn Brakefield. So I think you're going to see a lot of action, dribble handoff action that Beard likes to run. You're going to see a lot of it with Matt Murrell. You're going to see a lot of it if Brandon Murray is eligible. If not, Allen Flanigan and Jaemyn Brakefield. Jaemyn Brakefield, very underrated on a national level. If you've been watching SEC basketball, you know that Ole Miss has had their struggles, but Brakefield's had some pretty good games. Coming over from Duke, he's got that frame, that 6'8", 220 frame where he's pretty athletic and can knock out and knock down a shot, So I don't think we're going to see a traditional offense. I think it's going to be a little bit slow. It's going to be muddy games. It'll be a 60 to 55 game, and that's how this team's going to win games. But that's how Chris Beard has always won games. You've really never seen that flashy offense until he got to Texas and added Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen and all these conference level players. He doesn't have that this year.
Yeah, I think the combination of Murrell and Brakefield is the most
Yeah.
important part of this thing because, again, like I said earlier, I mean, Murrell, he did miss several games in there last year with an injury, but otherwise, I mean, he averaged 34 minutes a game. I think the shooting numbers are a little bit deceiving. He shot 36.5% from the floor, but you really think about it, I mean, he was the guy like every game, like, and everyone else knew that, and it forced him, I think, into a role where teams could easily just sort of, collapse onto him and not really worry about anybody else consistently. And that was just something that, was there again, aside from Brakefield probably, but they play different positions. And so, yeah, I thought that was something I would expect those numbers to go up a bit because I think they're more solid, perhaps overall. But yes, I think offensively, still to be determined. I think exactly what this team looks like, and like you said, winning some 60 to 55 type games. We've seen Ole Miss. They have been a rock fight team at times where they play some pretty low scoring games. I think that theme could continue even with the new coaching staff, just because it will take the offense perhaps a little bit longer to get going than it will defensively. Because I really like the way they'll be able to defend again without adding a Flanigan. I think Nunez will be able to help them there a bit too. And remember Murray, he's a couple years removed from that St. Peter's team. Remember, he was a freshman at the time they made that run, and he still played. He played a ton of minutes, but he played some valuable minutes there on that team. So I think all those things are crucial just to the overall body of work. But like you kind of talked about with Brakefield, I mean, he is. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm gonna pick him as the X factor, but like he is kind of the guy I think that when you look at it, if we are looking at it and saying Moussa Cisse is not going to be eligible to play. Let's say he doesn't play. You talked about it. I mean, Sharp is really your guy, right? At 7'5", and you know what his role is going to be in terms of being the guy in the paint and all this. But you also need someone like a Brakefield at 6'8" to be able to rebound. You need him to be able to defend. You need him to be able to do all these things, and I think he can because he's already proven that he can. Efficient score, those kind of things. So yeah, I think this team will pretty much be led by that combination of Murrell and Brakefield. And, again, that's where you really, if you go even further kind of into the true front court, it is playing the what if of like, man, could this team really have Cisse and Sharp on the floor, at the same time? And could they do some different things? You hope that's a possibility because that's where this becomes so much more intriguing for what Ole Miss could do next season. Whereas, if you get a Sharp on the floor, we know he can block, 4.1 shot per game last year. If
Yeah.
he gets in foul trouble, man, you just think about how different the game becomes at that point. And so even with Brakefield at 6'8", it's just a different situation. So yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued, but I think the front court, it's just again, if you're an Ole Miss fan, be rooting, send money, do whatever you got to do to the NCAA and try to get this waiver approved. So
I mean, we have seen like over the course of the whole summer, the NCAA has had this kind of dominant aura that they are denying all waivers. Like there's just no hope. But just over like the past few weeks, we've actually seen Tez Walker on UNC for football. He got his reversed, and we've seen Allen Flanigan get his, and there's a few other guys that have gotten their waivers. So I think
Tanner
they've
Holden, I think for Wright State,
Tanner
he got
Holden.
just
Yep, yeah. So I think the tides might start to be turning a little bit. So there's a little bit more hope. I was kind of down and out on Moussa Cisse being able to play over the summer, but I got a little bit of hope now.
Is it
Just
not silly though that we are sitting here in mid-October and there's no decision on this stuff yet? Like,
it's blowing it blows my mind because I mean, what are these programs supposed to do? Like, are they supposed to put them in with the starting squad during practice or
Like, how
prepare
long
for
should it take to make a decision on these kind of things? Like, should
it's
it really drag out months? Like, what kind of investigation is this? Like, is this? I mean, what are we looking at here? It's either I don't think this is as complicated as the NCAA makes it. I realize there are other factors that go into this, but just it's a new rule. Like, you just set the rule in place to either have, okay, we're either going to prove it in this scenario, we're not going to prove it in that scenario. So why is there a head coach out there who's already started practice and doesn't know if a player is going to be able to play basically 3 weeks before they tip off? Just that's neither here nor there. But
it
we
only
could,
hurts the game. It only
yeah.
hurts the game of college basketball, which we're all at the core. That's why we're all here. We love college basketball, and it only hurts the game. Um,
Anyways,
oh, moving on. Yeah. Team MVP time, Blake.
yeah. Quickly, we didn't mention Rashad Marshall. I mean, I think he's someone that
Mm,
could be interesting in terms of like because again he's another guy 6'8", whatever. What was he, the best player in Arkansas in terms of high school recruit? And so I think that's where even if a Cisse doesn't get the waiver, I think his development's going to be crucial because they may need him to step in and play right away. I'd be surprised if they don't. Again, just kind of given the state of the front court and how many people are there, period. It's a numbers game, and I think they'll really need Marshall to step in and play some. So I feel like he's the type of player, just kind of studying him a little bit, that will thrive like under a Chris Beard as a big man. But just want to make that quick note before we jump into X factors and MVPs. So
I'm happy you did do that because I actually love Rashad Marshall. I watched a lot of Rashad Marshall tape because I just wanted to really get this whole Ole Miss team down. And Rashad Marshall reminds me a lot of how San Diego State and Dutcher uses those power forwards like Jaden Ledee, A-Rop, Keyshawn Johnson. They weren't 3-point guys. They weren't stretch the floor guys at the four. None of them were. They were all back to the basket, hustlers, physical play, rebounders. That's what I think Chris Beard can, come down towards February, towards March, when these guys have gotten a little bit more minutes and they're not really playing like freshmen anymore. You can see Marshall coming off the bench at that 4 spot whenever Brakefield needs a rest or something like that. He can come in and alley-oop here or there, some hustle plays. So I do like that you mentioned Rashad Marshall because he is being underlooked just as like the freshman in the conference. That he's
yeah.
not being, talked about when you think of breakout freshmen, but he should be.
All right, X factor.
X factor. Okay. We got
There's a lot of
I'm
options I think on this team you could go with. But
there's a few options. But for my X factor, I went with Juju Murray. Just because we don't like everything else kind of seems like it's their role. You kind of know what Murrell and Flanigan and Brandon Murray, if he plays, are going to be in that kind of wing scorer role. You know what Brakefield's going to be doing at that stretch 4 role. You have Moussa Cisse and Sharp protecting the rim. Point guard. What are we going to get? That's why he's my X factor. And because he kind of came on strong last year. He finished the year with like I don't know how many games in a row in double digits. But he's tough. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Juju about a month ago. And he's just it's all game. Like I was trying to ask him, I was like, what are you doing your free time? He's like, I practice. Like I got more free time and more practice. And I was just like, geez, man, like this guy is just dialed in. So my X factor is Juju Murray, just because we don't really know what we're getting from the point guard.
All right, I'm going with a layup here. Although I don't know if this guy's shot a layup in years. It's probably more of a dunk, but I'm going Jamarion Sharp. I just think again, it's either way, whether Cisse plays or not. It's still Sharp to me because he is the guy that is the leader of a Chris Beard system. Like he is, you know what I mean? I mean he's the shot blocker. He's the one that drives the defense because of his ability to block as many shots as he can. And so look, it is an adjustment. Don't get me wrong. Like he's going from Western Kentucky to Ole Miss. I mean, it's the SEC, still the SEC, but I just think with the skill set, everything that's there, I don't really see him having a huge transition period or anything like that. But to me, it's like I don't know if he averages 4 blocks a game this year, but again, based on everything that they're going to do, this will be a team that I think could struggle at times to score consistently. And so because of that, I mean, he's going to have to, he's going to have to be there affecting plays as many possessions as possible. And so that's where, again, someone gets him in a foul trouble, something like that. And if you don't have a Cisse on the floor, like that just completely changes the dynamic, I think, of what Ole Miss can do in that situation. So, yeah, I think it's Sharp. Again, I think that's probably the easy pick, but I will go with him just because of the shot blocking ability and why why is Chris Beard's teams again always good defensively? Obviously, they'll get up in you in their guard, but it's also nice to have a guy like this who can kind of drive everything and block shots and protect the rim. So I'll go Sharp.
And he averaged 4.1 blocks per game, but that doesn't account for all of the shots that he alters that he doesn't
Right.
block.
Yeah.
So that number is even higher for just layups altered at the rim that end up, in a miss. Yeah, I like Sharp a lot. Team MVP, I'm probably going not with where you think I'm going on this one. I'm gonna go with Brakefield.
I thought
Um,
about that.
okay. I'm going with Jaemyn Brakefield because, and this is why. On the surface, Brakefield just looks like he's a decent stretch four. Puts up some decent numbers, has a few good games. In conference play, though, last year, it's like he flipped a switch. So if you look at his season totals, he only averaged about, I think it was a little under 8 points a game on the year. But if you look at in SEC play, he averaged above 13 a game. So, like, really flipped a switch. And I think just the coaching's better. The team is going to be better. I'm not sure how much the offense is going to improve. I know the defense is going to be top 10, but if Brakefield can just kind of maintain that like double digit points per game, he's going to be one of the best stretch fours in the conference. Those are the same numbers as Jalen Williams at Auburn. But he does not. If you were to ask the common fan, who would you rather take, Jalen Williams or Jaemyn Brakefield? Everyone would be like, oh, Jalen Williams. Ole Miss is terrible. No, it's literally the same numbers on paper, and I think Brakefield's a little bit quicker. He's got a little bit of a quicker step off the dribble. So, look for Brakefield to average in double digits next year. I would be surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, I think Brakefield's the most versatile player on the roster. I don't think there's any question in my mind about that. I think he's got the most upside in a lot of statistical categories. And again, I just think it's a good fit with Chris Beard. So, yeah, since you went with him, I'll go with Murrell. Again, I'll pick the layup on this one.
That was the other one.
I mean, I think he's again, if you're not going to go Brakefield, you're going to have to go Murrell to me. And it's just because of how many minutes he's played, the experience that he has. And, I think if some of those percentages go up, and I think they will, just given kind of the makeup of this roster, although it's, other teams are still going to know he's the biggest offensive threat that they have. So I'm curious to see just exactly, how much those percentages go up, whether it's overall field goal percentage or 3-point numbers. But I still think he's got to score probably at least 14 or more points per game for them to be successful this year. So I will make him my team MVP and probably the guy too that I would expect, leads them in minutes. Again, I wouldn't be shocked by that. So, all right, that is our picks for team MVP and X Factor. Now we wrap up with our predictions for the Ole Miss Rebels for this season. You want to talk about a ceiling and a floor? I think we may have said this summer. no one has a wider ceiling and floor than Ole Miss, just based on what we talked about at the jump, and that is the waiver situation with Murray and Cisse if they are eligible. I think this can be the sleeper team in the SEC that could, quite frankly, crack the top 5 in the standings, be an NCAA tournament team, not just a bubble team, but be a team that wins a lot of games. I don't know that they win the SEC title by any means, but I do think they can be a top 5 team in the league if both of those guys are there, if they can overcome some of the questions we have about consistent scoring. But I think that gives them a lot more depth and a lot more options, especially scoring wise with Brandon Murray, if that is the case. So that is my first scenario. The second scenario, if Murray and Cisse are non eligible, or if you maybe just get one or the other, right? Which we could go through another, but we'll just say, let's just say that they're both eligible in that scenario or not eligible in that scenario. That drops it down a bit because I think depth overall, like we said, front court depth is just, it would be lacking. I think at that point, you'd really need a Marshall. Not that he couldn't, but you'd really need him, I think, to play significant minutes right off the bat. And maybe that adjustment period of getting everyone, you know, figuring out that exact rotation takes a little bit longer at that point. But I still think in that scenario, they're probably an NCAA tournament bubble type team to maybe ninth, 10th in the SEC, something like that. And so, yeah, it's such a wide range here, but it really just depends on, I think, the waiver situation. So,
We pretty much see this Ole Miss team almost identically. Right on with if they're both eligible, I think it's a top half team. Not going to say they're going to win the SEC because
yeah,
there's some pretty dang good teams in the SEC this year, but top half finish. I would be if everyone's eligible and they don't finish top half, as in top 6. I would be surprised. I would
yeah,
think that Chris Beard could have done more with what he had. If these guys are not eligible, I still think Chris Beard somehow manages to have a top 30 defense. And I think the offense would struggle. I think I would compare that team to Mississippi State from last year. A really solid defense. It's hard to go and play at their place, but they're not going to shoot the lights out against you. They're not going to run you out of the building. So, if the guys are eligible, I think it's going to be a really solid team. That's a top 25 team at the end of the year and be looking at like a 5 seed in the tournament, when you always see like Houston as a 5 seed with a really good defense. You're like, wow, it's a dangerous 5 seed. I think that's what
yeah.
we could be looking like. If they don't, I think it'd be like Mississippi State on the bubble. The metrics would love the defense, so the numbers would be good, but they might miss the tournament. They might be on the bubble. Those are some really big names that you got to have play. But yeah, wide range.
Here is one other thing if you're looking at kind of projecting this team and figuring out potential strengths and weaknesses. You did say this could be similar to Mississippi State from last year, and unfortunately, I think that could be the case in one specific category, and that is 3-point shooting, because I'm not exactly sure where that comes from consistently on this team. And I think, look, they shot 30.3% last year. They were 344th nationally, so they weren't that far off from Mississippi State, who was the worst 3-point shooting team in the country last year. But I'm a little curious about that with this team, because, like I said, Murrell's numbers were not great. Elsewhere, you look at some of the numbers, like even a Brandon Murray, shot 32%, something like that. Flanigan's numbers were not that great, although I think he's better, probably shooting wise, than he showed last year, just statistically. So those are things that would worry me a little bit, just overall. I think with this team, kind of going into it. So yeah, so I mean, again, it goes back to the theme here that we've been saying, right? Where it's offensively, what do they get? What does it look like? And I think those are kind of areas where if you're looking at them game planning against it, I think there's a clear gap potentially in terms of perimeter shooting. But you also know that defensively, you're going to run into a team that's going to be very aggressive. It's going to block a lot of shots and make it hard to score. So this may not be the prettiest team to watch in the SEC this year, but guess what? Chris Beard doesn't care. He wants to win games, and I think they'll do that. So,
Yeah, I mean, here's one thing that I'll piggyback on that with. They got a bunch of guys that if they're open can knock down a shot, but aren't gonna be like Jordan Hawkins on UConn flipping around triple screen and bang one in 2 seconds. They don't have those guys. I mean, if you think about it, Chris Beard doesn't at Texas Tech, didn't really usually have those guys. You'd have guys that could knock it down if they were open.
You got good mid-range guys, I think, on this team. There's some guys that are good mid-range, can attack the basket, but there's not any of those like guys that you're going to be running, 15 plays a game for to get open threes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there you go. There are thoughts on Ole Miss heading into the 23-24 season. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. Check out more of our SEC team previews. We'll be previewing every team heading into the 23-24 season, and we'll have a lot more daily SEC basketball stuff coming up here soon. So hit that subscribe button. Again, if you want to advertise or sponsor, reach out to caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. And we appreciate you watching, as always, and talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.